This woman was just passing by the scene of a car accident, but she never expected to witness something unbelievable. Countless bees suddenly took flight, forming a massive tornado in midair. The truck driver stumbled out of the vehicle, trying to beg the mother and daughter in the car for help, but he was instantly swallowed by the stings of the swarm. The mother tried to start the car, but it was already too late. The bees clogged the exhaust pipe. They were completely trapped. Firefighters arrived at the scene very quickly. It turned out the truck was transporting killer bees, and under the impact and extreme heat they had completely lost control. The team decided to handle it as a toxic substance leak. The driver wrapped in killer bees had already stopped breathing, but according to the investigation there should have been another escort on the truck. They tried to use carbon dioxide spray to drive the bees away, but it had absolutely no effect. The captain planned to use a high-pressure water cannon, but the air intake was blocked by bees, causing the pump to fail. He had no choice but to request foam truck support from headquarters, but it would take at least 20 minutes to arrive, and the mother and daughter trapped in the car could not wait that long. Several killer bees entered the car through the air vents. The operator quickly instructed the mother to turn off the air conditioning, and told her that as long as they stayed still, the bees would not actively attack. But with bugs crawling on her face, how many children could really stay still?
No!
The girl's face was instantly covered in swollen stings, and the worst part was she was allergic to bees. The mother hurriedly took out the epinephrine she carried with her, and injected it into her daughter's leg following the operator's instructions. But because she moved too much, the mother was also stung. Even worse, both of them had inherited the bee allergy. The girl could only watch helplessly as her mother struggled in pain. The firefighters outside also realized how serious it was, desperately swatting at the killer bees around the car. Meanwhile, in another fire truck, the crew loaded a passenger whose face was swollen like a pig onto the vehicle, but they discovered his airway seemed blocked. They pried his mouth open, and saw countless killer bees crawling out. He had most likely inhaled them while screaming. The crew immediately inserted a suction device, and sucked all the bees blocking his airway out. At this moment there were still 6 minutes before the foam truck arrived. The allergic mother inside the car clearly could not last that long. One firefighter suddenly had an idea. He thought of using nearby cars to create smoke, and then using a high-power blower. The smoke instantly drove the killer bees off the car. The mother and daughter were successfully rescued, and sent to the nearest hospital, but the truck carrying the killer bees suddenly exploded. In the flames, countless killer bees took flight. According to incomplete statistics, at least 15 million killer bees scattered throughout the city. The firefighters' work was far from over. Fortunately, bees clock out after sunset. After a peaceful night, at a party hosted by fashion socialites, the host was introducing a perfume developed by her company. But the moment the perfume was sprayed on a guest on stage, her face suddenly changed. A massive swarm of killer bees was flying toward her. It was the same group that escaped from the truck earlier. Although killer bees are omnivorous, they are extremely sensitive to the scent of pollen. Guests rushed inside to hide, except for the girl who was sprayed with perfume. She was being stung non-stop, and had no choice but to jump into the pool to escape. So when the host called for help, they discovered the killer bees had all gathered above the pool. No matter how good the girl's swimming was, she could not last long. Luckily, there was a garden hose by the pool, helping her hold on until the firefighters arrived. But if they used smoke to drive the bees away, the girl underwater would choke from inhaling smoke. At the critical moment, one firefighter got an idea from the guests. Each party guest had been given a bottle of perfume, and as long as they sprayed this natural pollen perfume, they could lure the bees away from the pool. The captain immediately chose the fastest runner, and had him act as bait to save the girl underwater. Then they used a suction device to easily remove the killer bees from the firefighter. But the girl's condition was still very serious. Her body was covered in dense killer bee stingers. Even after epinephrine, her blood oxygen level kept dropping. Clearly the stingers were still releasing venom inside her body, pulling them out one by one. She would be dead before they were finished. Luckily, the medic on site was very experienced, and thought of using tape to remove most of the stingers at once, even though it accidentally waxed her body. Saving her life mattered more.
Can't believe that worked.
The crisis was successfully resolved. However, this time only 200,000 killer bees were involved. The rest of the massive swarm was still hiding somewhere unknown, and at more than 3,000 meters above ground. An old man used his life savings to fulfill his dream of flying, but never expected an accident on his first flight. A gray-brown cloud appeared in the distance, just as he asked the controller what it was. The plane flew straight into it. Killer bees entered the cabin through the vents. The old man struggled to maintain balance, trying to keep the plane on its original course. But as more and more bees filled the cabin, he finally raised the altitude slightly, only to discover a commercial airliner flying directly above. The airliner captain never imagined that just after unbuckling his seatbelt to rest, he would be sucked out through a hole the next second. The light aircraft was shattered into pieces, leaving several gashes on the airliner's fuselage. As oxygen masks dropped, passengers fell into panic. Officer Athena, who was escorting a prisoner, was also on board. She sprinted to the cockpit and woke the unconscious co-pilot. His thigh had been pierced by debris, and his consciousness was fading, but he used his last strength to bring the plane back to stable flight. As the co-pilot passed out again, passengers suffered various injuries from the collision. Athena tried to contact ground support, but the radio was damaged in the impact. Luckily, cell phones still had signal. She could only manually dial 911 for help. Ground control responded immediately, clearing nearby airspace, and said they would quickly find a flight instructor. They could not count on a random passenger knowing how to fly, so all hope was placed on Athena. While waiting, the chief steward brought 2 more pieces of bad news. Multiple passengers were injured, and debris from the light aircraft was still lodged above. The damaged opening could collapse at any time. Athena had no time to hesitate. She immediately had the steward upgrade passengers near the hull to business class for free, then used the intercom to calm everyone, saying there was no immediate crash risk, and asked passengers to help each other through the crisis. When air traffic control called again, the flight instructor was ready. He said flying a plane was actually very simple, just treat it like a flight simulator game. Even though she knew he was comforting her, Athena still felt enormous pressure. Losing this game meant death. As she nervously searched for the controls, a boy's voice suddenly came from behind her.
This one!
As an aviation enthusiast, the boy was clearly a flight simulator expert. With his help, Athena successfully turned the plane around, buying more time for rescue. Meanwhile, in the cabin, passengers began taking action. Unfortunately, none of them had medical backgrounds. They could only perform first aid under a doctor's remote guidance. One girl's leg was bent at 60 degrees. They had to cut it open immediately to relieve pressure. But all passengers had passed security. There was nothing sharp available. Luckily, one man came up with an idea. He took a lighter and a toothbrush, and ground a makeshift scalpel against a seat. Thanks to his time in prison, his technique was very steady. But who would perform the cut became the next problem. While they hesitated, the girl's leg swelled even more. If they waited any longer, the leg would be lost. A man in a floral shirt stepped forward, following the doctor's instructions. He stabbed in with the toothbrush blade. It felt just like slicing sausage. It looked bloody, but it successfully eased the girl's pain.
It feels better!
He then stabilized the fracture. The leg was saved. Passengers burst into applause. But in the middle of this brief harmony, a loud bang suddenly came from the ceiling. The debris finally gave way before landing. Large amounts of luggage were sucked out of the cabin. Fortunately, everyone was buckled in. No one repeated the captain's fate. But pressure issues caused the plane to rapidly descend. Athena had to increase speed by 30% to maintain balance. The operation itself was simple. Just push the control stick and press a few buttons. But every move decided lives. She had to be extremely careful. With the boy's assistance, the plane finally stopped descending and returned to level flight. But the situation was still grim. They had to land as soon as possible, or the hole would keep expanding until the plane completely broke apart. As Athena prepared for the next step, the steward brought good news. The co-pilot had regained consciousness. There was finally a licensed pilot on board. Air traffic control erupted in cheers. Everything seemed to be improving, but just as they helped him toward the cockpit, he suddenly gasped and collapsed. The internal injuries from the crash were severe. Standing up triggered them. Seeing the pilot had no pulse, Athena immediately began CPR, but it was too late. She knew this was not the time to grieve. The priority was landing the plane. Air traffic control had already cleared Los Angeles Airport's airspace and runway, and began explaining every step of emergency landing. It was not that complicated. Just line up with the runway. With the boys' help, Athena felt confident, but while controlling the descent, another problem occurred. A piece of debris destroyed the rudder. The plane instantly lost balance. Fortunately, the instructor on the phone was very experienced. He told Athena to rotate the heading control clockwise and move the control stick from left to right. They barely maintained balance, but everyone at air traffic control knew a safe landing was nearly impossible. They had to minimize losses. The original airport landing plan was abandoned. Now they had to find a sparsely populated open area outside the city. Hearing this, Athena looked at the boy beside her, hoping to increase survival chances, but air traffic control had to think big picture. At that moment, an elderly woman rushed to the cockpit, saying a firefighter named Bobby had called. He was Athena's husband and the fire chief. After hearing from the news about his wife's danger, he tracked down the phone number through the woman. Athena suddenly felt at peace. Being able to speak to her loved one last time might be heaven's mercy, but Bobby stayed calm. After hearing Athena needed a long runway, he simply said, "Don't worry, I'm here." Then he directed the fire department to Highway 110, blocking traffic sideways, instantly creating a runway long enough for landing. Another firefighter rode a motorcycle, blocking traffic in the opposite lane. Air traffic control exploded. It was rush hour. Their complaint inbox would definitely explode afterward, but saving lives came first. Athena and the boy encouraged each other. There were people waiting for them at home, so they had to succeed. As the landing gear deployed, Athena grabbed the intercom and told passengers they were making an emergency landing. The process would not be smooth, but they would do everything they could. She then looked at the boy, asking if he had anything to add. The boy simply turned on the fasten seatbelt sign, showing he was ready. As the plane got closer to the ground, Athena asked her husband to clear the highway, but Bobby firmly refused. He believed in his wife, even with danger so close. He had no fear.
Athena, I see you.
I see you too. I love you.
Tell me in person.
Under air traffic control's guidance, Athena and the boy worked in perfect sync, first adjusting autopilot altitude, then gradually reducing speed below 180 knots, then deploying the first flap stage, then the second, third and fourth. When the plane dropped below 400 feet, autopilot was disengaged. Athena tightly gripped the controls. As they passed below 100 feet, passengers closed their eyes, praying for a safe landing.
Thrust reversers.
As the plane landed steadily on the highway, the Killer Bee caused aviation disaster finally came to an end.